Week 14 of the fantasy football season, and here's the top 12 kickers I'm ranking this week. Number 1, Chris Boswell of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So this week, a great matchup for Boswell versus the Cleveland Browns. Obviously, a defense that's just taken a step way back this season, where last year they were one of the best defenses in the league, and now kickers and offenses just go up and down the field and put points on the board. So Boswell from 50+, he's been automatic all season long. We know this Pittsburgh Steelers offense stalls out at times, and this week, Chris Boswell versus Cleveland Brown team, I think he goes out there, has a big performance. Last week they put a lot of points on the board. Obviously it was this Pittsburgh Steelers team. I'm not expecting them to score as much as they did last week, but definitely low 30s, mid 30s is a possibility, I believe, for this Pittsburgh Steelers team. And Chris Boswell, he's got a big boot, and like I said, could kick it from anywhere. Number 2, Cameron Dicker of Los Angeles Chargers, 3 weeks in a row with double-digit fantasy points for Cameron Dicker. I know this week it's going to be tough going into Arrowhead on Sunday Night Football, where it's a tough place to kick the football. We saw Daniel Carlson last week miss 3 field goals, where the Raiders would have pulled the upset victory. But Cameron Dicker, all season long, 50+ yards as well for him. He's gone out there putting points on the board. This Charger team stalls out a whole lot, and this week they're going to have to try, I believe, some long field goals as well if they want to keep up on the scoreboard with Kansas City, or just stay ahead. Overall, number 3, Jake Bates of the Detroit Lions. Jake Bates, he's on a high-powered offense, arguably the best offense in all pro football. And the last few weeks, his numbers have been double-digit fantasy points as well. So this week, in a potential high-scoring game versus the Green Bay Packers, where I believe both teams are going to put points on the board early and often, especially on Thursday night, where these games are usually high-scoring. Jake Bates, indoor game, can't beat that. He's been very accurate. He's been a clutch kicker as well at times for this Detroit Lion team. And this week, I think he goes out there once again, has a good performance. Number 4, Jake Elliott of the Philadelphia Eagles. I know last week it was a down game a little bit for Elliott, where the Eagles found the end zone the majority of their scoring in that game. We only had 6 fantasy points. But this week, a great matchup versus the Carolina Panthers, that obviously teams are up and down the field all game long, and they give up the 4th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. So Elliott, we know he's got an accurate boot. Carolina can't stop anyone all season long, and it wouldn't be surprising to me if Philadelphia scores in the mid-30s or even touches the 40s in this game. 5, Jason Sanders of the Miami Dolphins. So last week definitely was a down game for Jason Sanders in the cold weather, but the good news, Miami comes back home to the nice Miami weather. This week the New York Jets come to town. They can't stop anyone, and Jason Sanders, 3 games in a row before last week in the cold game at Green Bay, he had double-digit fantasy points. He kicks better at home than he does on the road, obviously, with better weather and better conditions. And this week versus the New York Jets, like I said, who can't stop anyone and give up the 6th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. I think this offense of Miami, they're going to put points on the board early and often. And Jason Sanders, he's always a kicker that if he gets opportunities, he's going to hit it more times than not. Number 6, Chase McLaughlin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So it's been a nice season here for Chase McLaughlin, and it's a great matchup versus the Vegas Raiders that give up the most fantasy points to kickers on the season. So McLaughlin, we know he could kick from 50+ yards. Last week, 2 big field goals, a game-tying 55-yard field goal to send it to overtime, and then a game-winning field goal in overtime. I know he missed one as well, is McLaughlin, but opportunities have been there week in and week out for Chase McLaughlin in this offense. Tampa Bay, they have a good offense, no doubt about it, led by Mike Evans and the running backs and Rashad White and Bucky Irvin. And this week versus Vegas, I think they're going to have their way with this defense and go up and down the field, and a lot of red zone opportunities. Number 7, Brandon Aubrey of the Dallas Cowboys. I know this offense isn't putting up as many points as they were last season, obviously, but with Cooper Rush in there, quarterback now, the last 2 ball games, Dallas has actually put up 34 and 27 points. So opportunities have been there with Aubrey. Last 2 games, 12 and 9 fantasy points. And this week in a potential high-scoring game versus Cincinnati Bengals, where we know the Bengals, they can put up 40 points easily any week with that type of offense. Also, they give up 35, 40 points as well, and they've lost in a lot of high-scoring shootouts this season in Cincinnati. So Brandon Aubrey, we know he's a kicker that he could kick 55, 60 yards in his sleep. And this is a game where the Cowboys know if they want to keep up on the scoreboard, they might have to trot him out there for a couple 50+ yarders in this one. So Brandon Aubrey, home game, straight at home indoors for this Dallas Cowboy team. And I believe Aubrey once again could go out there, have a solid ball game. Number 8, Tyler Bass of the Buffalo Bills. So Tyler Bass, it's been an up and down season for him, no doubt about it. But when you're in a high-powered offense, and opportunities are going to be there week in and week out, I think he could go out there in this ball game and put points on the board is best. It's an indoor ball game and just as well at the Los Angeles Rams that give up the 10th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. And this could be a high-scoring game. Offenses that put a lot of points on the board obviously going at it in this one. It was a game obviously last week where it was snowing the whole game and you're not going to kick the football well. So this week, indoor game at the Rams. Their defense really hasn't been great all season, and I think Bears bounces back with a good performance. Number 9, Evan McPherson of the Cincinnati Bengals. So McPherson, the last couple weeks, he's gotten the numbers back up, but the only issue is they score a lot of touchdowns as a Cincinnati Bengal team, and his ceiling's pretty much been 8 and 9 fantasy points already this season here is Evan McPherson. That's the only one downside, obviously, in an offense like this. You're not going to have great points week in and week out, but I still believe in this one at the Dallas Cowboys. Give up the 7th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. That Evan McPherson will get more opportunities than just relegated to extra points. In the last couple weeks, he's had 9 and 8 fantasy points, but like I said, the ceiling is that high for Evan McPherson, and he has been missing 50-plus yardage, but this week it's a good matchup, and the Cowboys give up a lot of points as well. Pretend Matthew Wright of the Kansas City Chiefs. So it's either going to be Matthew Wright or Spencer Schrader as the kicker for this Chiefs team. We know Schrader missed last week's game with the hamstring injury, but I think Matthew Wright, after he went out there and had a nice ball game for Kansas City, he's going to get another opportunity. We know Harrison Butker, he's out a few more weeks for this Kansas City Chiefs team, but Schrader was filling in well, and then last week Matthew Wright went out there and had 14 fantasy points. So this week, in a grinded out division type of game where this Charger defense at most times doesn't bend and teams have to be forced to field goals, I think Wright, if he's the starting kicker this week, could go out there once again and have a decent ball game with opportunities. Number 11, Jake Moody of the San Francisco 49ers. So Jake Moody, it hasn't been a great season for him, obviously. And this offense, they've definitely taken a step back this season as well. And in the last 2 weeks, getting blown out, even though the weather conditions obviously weren't great, 38-10 in a rainy, cold, wet ball game at Green Bay. And then last week in the snowstorm at Buffalo, there's nothing you can do about it, obviously, as a kicker, where there's no traction and nothing, 35-10 losing in that one. But this week back home in San Francisco, good matchup versus the Bears that can't stop anyone all season long, giving up top 10 fantasy points to kickers on the season. I think Jake Moody, he could go out there, he could have a decent ball game. And now with Christian McCaffrey out for the season here, this team, they might stall out even more in the red zone and have to settle for field goals. So this week versus the Bears in a good matchup, I like Moody as a top 12 option and the 12th and final kicker. Because Brandon McManus of the Green Bay Packers. So Brandon McManus, it's been a good signing for this Packer team over the last month of the season. So McManus has gone out there. He's had 3 out of 4 games with double-digit fantasy points. And this week we know it's going to be a high-scoring game most likely, especially at Thursday night where both teams have great offenses in the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers. And this Lion team, they're bend but don't break at times. So I think McManus, he's been in a groove. An indoor game as well is always a plus, obviously, not dealing with the elements, wind, rain, snow, whatever the case may be. So I think Brandon McManus could go out there once again, and it wouldn't be surprising to me if he possibly could hit double digits this week. So that's the top 12 kickers I'm ranking for week 14 of the fantasy football season.